Hey guys, what is happening? Welcome to a little bit different format. It's not really a podcast, but we're gonna have some discussion tonight. I have Christian here with me, and I don't know who that person is up there, but there might be somebody there. I'm not even sure. Um, but we've been talking recently about. Oh,
Oh,
hey.
sorry. Do you guys start already?
Who invited you anyway?
What are we doing?
Anyway, so. As I was saying, we want to start like a new series about whitetail hunting and the different things that we do to prepare for it and how we're looking at properties and try to be relevant about what is happening at that current time. So, this time of year is the time for running trail cameras, deciding where you're gonna be hanging sets and figuring out a plan for the season. Obviously, as we progress closer to the season, different things will become more relevant, and we'll try to continue down that path and just talk about things that have worked for us, that haven't worked, things that we've learned over the years, and kind of just have a discussion amongst ourselves in hopes that you guys can, at least take away, a couple things from that. Anything you guys got before we dive in here?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that we are not experts by any means, and we learn every single day. We learn from each other, and Christian and I were talking a lot about this last week on the podcast about how you constantly that's what's great about archery, right? Is that you're constantly learning from your mistakes. So as we learn, we just want to share what we've learned, and it's also hunting, so. There's no guarantees that we share something with you and you go out and you try it and it absolutely works because it's still hunting.
Chances are it probably won't work.
Yeah.
that's hunting.
It's all theory until you've got a deer on the ground, right?
Exactly.
That's our disclaimer.
And then you kill a deer, and then whatever you did, that's what everyone should do.
That's right.
That's how it goes.
That's so true, though, right?
Yeah,
everything we talk about tonight, it's because you had probably one occurrence that was successful, and now it's truth.
That's true. So here's how we're going to do it. So we've picked 3 areas that we want to talk about, and we want to look at 3 different type of properties. We all kind of have a different experience, which we'll get into in a little bit, but the 3 areas that we want to focus on, which is really relevant for this time of year, is trail camera placement, how you're using those, where you're putting them, stand placement, which that's something that you should have a pretty good handle on this time of year, or if not very soon, to get your stands up. You don't want to be hanging stands a week before the season or in the season. Now, you don't necessarily need to hang a set. You could climb, but you need to know where you're going, what you're doing. And then something that we've really been focused on this past year and are going to focus a lot more on this year is entry and exit. So we're going to be talking about that. So there's 3 type of properties that we want to focus on, and we all kind of have different experiences. So I grew up doing a lot of urban hunting in neighborhood areas, a lot of small pockets of woods, a lot of houses around, which can it's different, but it can be, especially for archery hunting, can be a really, really exciting type of hunt if you get the right area, and we have some great area down here for that. Corey is going to talk about more of the public type hunting. He grew up doing a ton of public hunting, and he has a pretty good feel of things you should do on public land. And then Christian, being out, in Western PA, has done a lot of farm hunting. So that's really where he spends most of his time. So he's going to talk about that. So we're going to apply those 3 areas that I talked about to each of those 3 type of properties in hopes that we can kind of cover the gamut, at least to some extent, of different type of spots that people could potentially be hunting and take something away from there.
Yeah, I'm actually excited to hear Christian because all I've been hearing him talk about is groundhogs. I don't even know if he hunts whitetails.
I don't know either.
I don't know anything but a groundhog. Sorry, I got nothing for you.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So who wants to start? It's not me. I've talked enough. One of you guys has to start.
Oh man, Christian, why don't you start, man? Let the new guy start.
All right.
New guys on the spot. So can you can maybe just dive in, and then do you want to, whenever you want to bring up the map, I don't know how we do that, but you can.
Yeah, you should, at the bottom of your screen, you should see a share screen, Christian. You hover over it.
Let me check
Pretty much
that
share
out.
your screen.
Okay, yeah, I got to share screen.
Yeah, so if you want to, whenever you want to share it, if you want to talk first, whatever you want to do, and then we can fill in too. I mean, obviously, when I talk about my hunting, we've all done that type of hunting, and we've all hunted farms, so we can all kind of jump in and talk
Yeah.
about different experience. But
Yeah. You start it up, man. Tell us what your thoughts are and what your approach is and things like that, and we can add something, and we will.
Yeah, so I'm going to share a farm with you that I'm really excited about, calling it the Grand Slam Farm. Reason being is I have 4 confirmed deer that are absolutely shooters, mature deer, all over 130 inches, 4.5 years old, older. So hence the Grand Slam. Really nice farm, excellent mix of timber and food sources, being corn, clover, and soybeans primarily. A lot of great oak stands too on this property. So probably the biggest thing that I'm looking at with this property is the food. And something that I think is great about food is that deer may move and deer may change a whole lot, but one thing that doesn't move is food, right? That food is stationary and it's not going anywhere. So share the screen here. Let me know if this comes up, fellas.
All right.
Got me?
I see a blank.
There
Yep,
it is.
here he is. Perfect.
There it is. The Grand Slam Farm.
There it
Yes,
is.
this is the Grand Slam Farm.
And what's the address there before we start?
Yeah, longitude lat.
The address is 181, don't worry about it, Lane.
I'd take that GPS coordinates whenever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the Grand Slam Farm. Can you see my cursor here?
Yep.
So where my cursor is at the bottom of the screen there, that is the entry road, and it's the only road into the property. There's a couple houses down farther below. This is the homeowner there. Another homeowner with 2 dogs, which is important to me.
Yep.
I take that into account. 2 dogs that roam, and I can confirm that with trail camera pictures.
Christian, before you continue, Corey, just before we keep going here, are we sure that we're going to be able to see his cursor on the recording?
No.
Okay, so use your cursor, but talk about actually where you're
features.
so that people can follow just in case, because we're not 100%.
Sure. So the entry road, it pretty much looks like a reverse question mark. It's the only road coming up in. You've got a house at the bottom of the screen, again, landowner, a house in the middle of the screen, and then a house to the right side of the screen, and that is going to be actually a vacant house. There's no one living there. So at the very bottom of the screen, you've got a soybean field, and that is there's one other soybean field planted on this property this year, but that soybean field is getting hit 10 times as hard. So right off the bat, as far as how that's relating to those 3 components that we talked about, right? Trail camera use, stand location, and entry and exit. Again, we're focusing on the soybean field at the bottom of the screen. If you can see my cursor here, I'm circling it. It's right below the house at the bottom of the screen.
Yep.
I have a trail camera that I've gotten some excellent pictures on in late July and early August, again, with those deer really heavily feeding in there. I have a trail camera set up on the edge. That has given me excellent intel, mostly on the inventory, as we call it, of the potential deer to harvest on this property. As many would agree, the best food source is going to attract the greatest deer.
Can you just, I don't mean to interrupt, can you just share kind of your approach and what your goal is when you hang a trail camera in July versus when you're going to hang it in, say, August? Is there a difference for you? Does it vary for property, or do you just, I guess, what is your approach on that? Like when you go in and hang a camera July 4th versus hanging it, mid-August?
Sure. if I have a really solid food source earlier in the summer, say July, I may keep it the same and do the exact same thing that I did here and put it on the edge of the soybeans where I think they are entering or spending some time feeding. If that food source hasn't quite developed yet, I'll say I may put out a mineral site to give the deer an extra incentive to get in front of that trail camera. I would say in the grand scheme, it's not going to change for me all that much. These soybeans have been looking good for, a good month or so. So not a huge difference. I'm always going to keep in mind that I want to be able to check that trail camera with minimal invasion on the property. So at the bottom of the screen there, you see that road literally borders the soybean field. I'm able to park on that road, head into the soybean field, check the camera, and get out of there. On either side of that soybean field are two great bedding areas, and I knew they were bedding areas due to the nature of the terrain. Both of those pieces of timber on each side of the soybean field at the bottom of the screen are heavy slopes, and I've never been in them. I've never walked through them, but I know just by that slope and just by what I can see that they're good bedding areas. And then that was confirmed with the trail camera, seeing deer come out of there, not only with the placement of the trail camera, but I've also spent quite a bit of time glassing and watching that field and watching deer come out of it. So that again confirmed bedding areas for me. So that by and large has been my main trail camera. Now I do have a few others on some good pinch points in some of these timber strips and on the edges of a few other bedding areas. But by and large, again, I really have put all my focus in getting those trail cameras on food sources, because the food will not fail and the food does not move. So I know that sooner or later I'm going to get pictures of those deer.
And that can be applied to all three different properties. I mean, that I think is consistent where this time of year, if that food doesn't move, I mean, that's a good place to put them, right?
Sure. And the last thing I'll add on that comment, Corey, is that particularly on this farm property, when you have food that might be hit harder at a certain time of year, like soybeans right now in August are getting crushed, as they're big and green for those deer, where, come mid-October, when those soybeans start to yellow, that might not be something that is as valuable. So I'm taking advantage of it now, where those soybeans are really concentrating the deer. I guess that is something that's really important to note, is that that one really healthy soybean field is concentrating the deer. When I've been glassing that field a lot, and every night an easy 15 deer are out in that soybean field that's, an acre, 2 acres in size. So any thoughts there from you guys as far as?
No, I think it makes complete sense. Obviously Corey and I have a farm that we hunt as well. And it's food source. Like, that's where we're putting our cameras, and we keep them right on the edge of the field where, in our situation, there's paths around all the edges of the fields. We just drive like the gator basically around, and we don't even have to get out of that. We can leave it running. Easy check, easy get out. The deer aren't spooked because they're used to that. They know there's no danger. I think that's really important this time of year, is if you have a perfect opportunity with food sources to keep it right on the edge of the field where you can get in and get out and not bother the deer. Don't overcomplicate things. Don't go in and put it way back in a bedding area. Like, you don't need to do that. The deer are going to be coming out to the field at some point. Even if it's at night, you can still get some information from that. So I think, that's kind of what we've done and my takeaway from that. But I think you're pretty similar.
Sure.
But why don't you jump into stand placement?
Sure.
And when you're talking about stand placement, we were talking about this earlier, how there's an early season, which deer are pretty heavy focused on the food, and then it kind of rolls into the rut, and then the late season. So talk about mainly early season stand placement, but then also in the back of your mind, and maybe just touch on it briefly. We'll get to it in later talks, but I'm sure you have an idea where you want to hunt the rut on this farm as well.
Yeah.
And you should be thinking about that. So maybe just touch on that a little bit, and then also late season as well.
Sure. Yeah. So as far as early season goes, that's going to be dominated by, again, the food sources, which I have very clear food sources here, which is great. Probably the very earliest, opening day, October 1st, provided they're still in there based off of scouting, will be that soybean field. Let me see if I can move the screen. If you can see my cursor, great. If not, right to the right of the Google logo at the bottom of the screen, there's a brown patch in the middle of the soybean field here. I have a blind set up there, and that's on the southern side of the soybean field. The bedding areas are to the left and to the right. So I'm going to hunt that with a wind coming out of the north, blowing south. Mm-hmm. I could also get away with any wind that's generally blowing into the south in some capacity. Mm-hmm. That is going to be really early. I may only get a week there if I'm really lucky, maybe 2 weeks before those soybeans start to go out. But hopefully I can still catch some mature deer coming into those soybeans and hitting them there. So I have a blind there. This was something we talked about with Corey and Dave, that I did not feel there was a great opportunity for a tree stand, and beyond that, it just wasn't going to pan out well with conditions as far as wind goes and entry and exits and different things. So I chose a blind. I'm excited about it. I really think that there's a good opportunity for it there. I have a place that I can park to make a quick entry, because we have to consider time. It's not a bulletproof entry and exit, as far as there is a risk to being exposed to some deer, but it was the best I could do, and I do feel it will be successful. So food number one, as soon as the season starts, will be the soybeans. As the season progresses, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks into October, right in the middle of the screen, you see the straightaway of the drive with some trees along it. My cursor's going up and down, and on either side you can see green strips. Those are 2 excellent clover fields with then corn on either side of those. I have a stand, if you can see my cursor, right in one of these trees in the middle of the strip.
How far is it to each cornfield? Shootable?
Yeah, to each cornfield you're looking about 40 yards or so.
Okay.
To the edge of the cornfield.
Yeah.
So the primary, now with this, I had to pick and choose really the bedding areas that I was going to be focused on.
Why did you pick this spot for that particular time of year? What are your thoughts? Like, what was your rationale for doing that?
Bedding and food.
Okay. Where explain that more with this map?
Yeah, sure. So the house at the bottom of the screen, directly left of that, is the densely wooded and brushed slope that I had mentioned earlier. That is a really solid bedding area that never gets bothered. It's between a lake, it's a big slope, and then the soybean field. So great location. As they stop hitting those soybeans to the right of that bedding area at the bottom of the screen, they're going to come up into these clover strips. So with the stand in these trees here along the drive, I can hunt it with any wind coming out of the south, blowing away from that bedding area. The deer also bed on the left side of the screen. You can see the really expansive timber. they come out of this draw that my cursor's running along here. They come out of this draw, swing around this ridge, cross the creek, and come up into the corn and into the clover. Mm-hmm. So that's what I chose to focus on for the food and the bedding purpose. Yep. And I also have a great exit and entry, which I can park up at this barn here at the building towards the top of my screen. I can swing down around this left edge of the corn, which is a lot lower than this drive and ridge of trees, so I'm not visible from the other side. I'm okay with the wind blowing from the south or blowing from the west, and I can swing in there. However, the sacrifice with this stand is I do jeopardize this bedding area. However, my decision with that is I wasn't all that concerned because this bedding area will thin out by the time October comes. Mm-hmm. It will not hold very many deer. It's largely big hardwoods that I do not feel will be that much of a downfall. So
in that bedding area he's talking about, in case you can't see the cursor, is a little bit north of the house and then to the east a little bit.
Yeah.
Like right in that timber.
Yeah. So my stand location shifts from that real early soybean spot to the clover spot. And then when we're talking rut, I'll touch on quickly.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking food and bedding, and what I want to do is play the terrain to get a stand between as many bedding and food sources as possible, because I'm essentially hunting the doe, as a lot of us have heard before, because those doe are still going to be doing the same things, looking for security in bedding and focusing on the prevalent food sources. So if I can get in a well-traveled spot between those two things, then I am hoping to catch the mature bucks going back and forth between the two. Now, I will tell you, I have an awesome Millennium tree stand and climbing sticks in the back of my trunk. And I have not pulled the trigger in setting them yet because I am still studying this a little bit and still putting some thought into where exactly I want that to go, because I'm going to try to kill two birds with one stone and potentially hunt it late October when the acorns start to fall and during the rut.
Yeah.
So right now what I'm looking at doing is hanging the stand somewhere in this gully. There are a lot of white oaks here. These food sources are still going to play a big role in the evening. So what I'm hoping is I'm going to catch deer coming out of the bedding area at the bottom of the screen here, catching deer coming off of this ridge towards the food, and catching deer coming off of this slope, all heading out of bedding to food. And this is the center point between all of the food and all of the bedding.
Yep. So basically, where you're looking at is right in the middle of the screen, pretty much.
Area I'm looking at is in this gully, right in the middle of the screen. All of the bedding is on the left side of the screen or the bottom of the screen. All the food is on the top of the screen or to the right of the screen. So it still allows me to enter somewhat safely. I do have to intrude a little bit more than those other stands I had talked about, but I'm okay with that as far as when it comes to the rut.
Yeah.
Making longer sits.
Yep. Makes sense.
That's what that looks like. And what I'm thinking as far as an exit and entry route for there is to park again at the top of the screen at this building.
Red house. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Red house at the top of the screen. Go directly west and come down this creek bottom to enter the stand so that I'm not getting too close to any of the bedding.
Yeah.
So again, that's still a work in progress. That I may alter that a little bit, but the more that I study it and look into it, the better I feel with it.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
That is the Grand Slam Farm.
There it is. Well, hopefully, come October 1, your rut stand won't matter too much.
That's right. I'm hoping I don't have to put a single sit in it.
Cool.
Yeah, that stand might stay in your trunk if you leave it there long enough.
Yeah, seriously. All right. Can you exit screen, Christian?
I sure can. Where is that?
I don't know.
Bottom. Go to the bottom.
You might have to maximize the video screen again.
Wait a second.
There we go. We're back.
He's back.
Well, yeah. So I mean, that was like just a good idea of like how you could potentially hunt a farm with a lot of ag fields, and as you can see, like not intruding on the bedding areas is key. And hunting the edges and those things are all really, really important. So I'm excited to see how that one works out this year. So, Corey, me or you?
You want to flip a coin? You want to talk public land?
I'm ready. Mine's not going to be that long. Like mine doesn't change that much. So
I mean, I think it's fascinating to talk urban hunting because I think I think there's quite a few guys that kind of I would say hesitate, right? Like the spots that are urban, a lot of times guys hesitate to ask permission to hunt because it might be in a community or something like that.
Yeah.
And in reality, there's some really big deer in urban areas.
Yeah.
Seen it.
A lot of deer.
Consistently, the biggest deer that I've seen in stand and on camera have been in urban areas. Like there's just what it is for me.
Why don't you talk urban and then I'll close it up with some public land talk.
All right, let me see here. Let me share out my screen. So this one. Tell me if you guys can see it.
It's coming. There it is.
So as you can see, this looks a little bit different than Christian's farm. A couple more houses. But this is urban hunting. So right in the middle of the screen, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but right in the middle of the screen is just a small patch of woods. And this is a spot that I've hunted for probably 5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So right in the middle, you'll see a pool. So my access is down that person's backyard from the north. There's a driveway. You can't really see it, but come down through there, walk through their backyard. And then between that house and on the right is a cul-de-sac. That's like really the patch of woods. So let me just zoom out real quick and kind of explain some of the things that are going on here. So if you can still see that one backyard, it's right up there toward the top. I'm just going to zoom out.
So you said you hunt from the pool, right, Dave?
Yeah, I hunt in the pool. Yeah, I'm on a floaty with my bow. Yeah, you actually could do that. It works great.
Early season, it's hot enough.
Yeah, it's great. There are some just ridiculous deer sanctuaries in this area, unlike anything that I've seen before. I mean, I've like to walk through there postseason, and the deer sign in there and the deer that I've kicked out, I mean, it's pretty incredible. And if you just look at the map, there's not a lot of places for them to hang out that are super safe. So, so if you look at the bottom, go ahead.
I'm going to ask you a question quick. So when you're looking at this, just for everybody that's looking at it, you see how many houses are here. And this is basically a community. There's a cul-de-sac up there on like towards the top right of the screen. One of the things that I never heard the term sanctuary, believe it or not, up until probably like 3 or 4 years ago. And I've hunted a long time. So there possibly could be somebody else out there that's watching this that doesn't know exactly what a sanctuary is. So Dave, can you explain kind of what a deer sanctuary is? Like, what does that mean?
Sure. Now I don't know if there's like an official meaning, but for me, and in this situation, it's just an area that in such a crowded area with all these houses and all these people is an area that nobody goes into. and no one can really access it, and it's just where the deer hang out in bed all day, and they really never really have much of a reason to leave.
Yep.
This particular one, so if you're looking at the screen, you can see right in the middle there's that big circle, like the neighborhood. So to the south of that, along that busy road, is a sanctuary. It's like a swamp, and nobody goes back in there, and just tons and tons of bedding back in there, really thick, really safe for the deer. To the north of that circle is also a bedding area. Zoom in a little. It's like a sewage area. I'm not exactly sure, but really thick. We've tracked some deer through there, crawling hands and knees to get through there. You just can't get through there. But the deer sign is just unlike anything I've ever seen in other spots.
Dave, on that note, can you shed some light, if you go up to the sanctuary that you're actually hunting?
Yeah.
Can you shed some light on what makes a piece of sanctuary, as far as you're thinking thickness, or sometimes like backyard fences can do it, or terrain or whatever?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that I've seen in these type of areas is swamps are huge. If you have like water, like people don't walk through swamps. People don't go into swamps. Deer do. They have no problem going through there. So if you have like a swampy area, I love like getting a property or being a property near a swampy area. I know deer bedding somewhere in there. And then just the thickest, nastiest stuff that you can find. You're going to find deer in there. And that's what both of those spots are. Like you literally can barely get through either of them.
Yep.
And I just know that's where the deer just spend a lot of their time. So that's two bedding areas. And then the other one is going to be a little bit hard to see. But so here's our backyard right in the middle with the pool. So it's actually over and to the right. So if I zoom out a little bit more, this property is basically surrounded by like 3 bedding areas. And where I'm hunting is like a transition area pretty much. I'm gonna first talk about trail camera, because this is different in here. Trail cameras in this property, I mean, this is like a 7-acre property, very small. For the most part, like I'm just looking to inventory. I've hunted here a long time, and there's really just not a ton of patterns in here, to be honest. The deer are in those bedding areas. They're cruising through this area that I hunt. They bed down in there. They walk through there. They hang out in there.
All day long.
All day long. I mean, you could hunt early season 10 to 2 and have just as much success as if you hunted in the morning. That's just the type of spot it is. So trail cameras in here aren't really for patterning deer a ton. They're really more for seeing what inventory is there. Now, if I didn't know this property, I'd be trying to put them at pinch points to see if deer are coming through, or maybe they're heading to bedding areas to try to identify bedding areas. But I spent enough time here to know where the pinch points are, know where the bedding areas are, that just doesn't – it just – the trail cameras are just telling me what deer are there that year. So as far as stand placement goes, I'm looking at 2 things. I'm looking at pinch points, going into my woods from bedding areas, and I'm looking at the wind. Those are the 2 main things that I'm looking at in this spot. Like food, not a huge factor in here. Like obviously these deer are eating, obviously they're going to bed, but I mean, if you look at this map, I mean, there's really no ag fields around. There's one to the north here. They do come from that direction sometimes in the morning, but it's just not a huge factor here. So this is going to be a little tricky on the map if you can't see my cursor, but I'll give it a shot anyway. So you see the pool here, right? And then you see directly to the south, there's a house, and then to the left of that, there's another house. So in between those 2 houses, both those houses have a fence around them.
Wow.
In between those 2 houses is a perfect pinch point.
That's huge.
And then if you look back down through here, below that is that bedding area.
Yeah.
So the deer tend to come right down through there. Now, I've tried to hunt that right on that pinch point. I haven't got permission to do that, unfortunately, because that would be the absolute killer spot in this area.
You'd also be looking in their back windows.
Yeah, I'd pretty much be hunting off their deck. So I haven't done that yet. But that's a type of pinch point where I'm trying to get as close as I can to that, because they almost have to go through there, and then they can kind of disperse out. And then on this other side, I'm trying to see if I can explain it here. So if you see that the cul-de-sac to the north at the top of the screen, and then kind of below that there's a strip of woods that runs from left to right, and then that opens up into the main wooded area. So there's another pinch point. So if I zoom in here, you see the house at the top, and then you see the other house at the bottom. In between those two is another pinch point, and then to the right of that tree line, they bed back in there too. So I do have a stand right on that pinch point. That's what I'm looking for as far as stand placement, and then I'm playing the wind, right? So on this one, if I'm in the middle of the screen, right, there's the house. I have my stand right to the left of that main house, and I want my wind to be a west wind blowing directly into that house. On the other side, I'm hunting like right on the edge of this backyard, and I want an east wind blowing across, blowing away from the middle of the woods. I have access from both sides of the property, so I never have to walk through. My property is right in the middle of the screen. I never have to walk through the middle of the property, and I never want to. I want to come in on the edge, hunt my pinch point, and leave, and that's it. Deer will never know that I was there. And if I play the wind right, they'll never smell me either, unless they are standing in the person's house. That's the only way they're really going to smell me, which can happen. They can get pretty close. But the pinch points and then playing the wind, and then honestly just spending a lot of time in those stands when you have the perfect wind. That's the majority of what I do here.
What's that? We're bound to come by at some point.
Yeah, I mean, these woods, I've sat days in these woods, and it's just exploded with deer. I mean, the one day Corey and I saw like 7 or 8 buck in one day last year.
We had deer that day you're talking about when we were on that big deer. I really think we just whatever happened, we found them dead. But anyway, we were on them, and that day we had, like you said, 7 buck, and they were chasing doe like right where your cursor is, where you're just pointing that house.
That house is
just running through that backyard. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're just running through the yard, running through. So it's a crazy different kind of hunt if you've never hunted urban before, and you'd be surprised what kind of big deer you can see running around in somebody's backyard. Because they also feel safe. They're more used to people there. They just are. They're used to cars. They're used to kids screaming and yelling and playing and weed whackers and all that stuff. They're just used to that stuff. That's what they live. They live by that. They don't fear those kinds of things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'd say the biggest things, if urban hunting, you don't need to shy away from it. There's a lot of good spots. These little pockets. Like if I zoom out here and look at this map, I would never think I would want to hunt in here. But I mean, I've seen in these woods 140, 150 class deer, no doubt. And so it's just a matter of playing the wind. I mean, you should do that anyway, anywhere you go, but really play the wind here. Find your pinch points, find the thickest, nastiest stuff, and hunt the edges. If you have a little pocket of woods, 5 acres, hunt the edges. Don't go in the middle of it. Let the deer be safe. Let the deer grow in there, and you'll have a lot more success. So that's my take on urban hunting. It's fun though. It is fun. It can you can have some pretty crazy days sitting in between like 5 houses where you're just running all over the place, and you just never know what can come rolling through there. It's fun.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to throw in there about urban hunting is there are so many variables that, in my experience, it really narrows down your ideal stand spots as far as like it almost makes it easier to know where to put a stand than like the farm I shared. I mean, there are hundreds of places that I could justify putting a stand, but you go into a 10-acre urban property and you consider things like house fences and land and house tenant habits. Is it an older couple that never comes out of their home?
Yep.
Deer feed 10 feet from their back deck, or is it a family with 5 kids, 3 dogs, and an outdoor cat? Yeah. Then you have things like roads. There are so many things that you take into account that it almost guides you in where the best place to hunt.
It does.
It's fun. Yeah. It's fun.
It is.
Types of variables, right? All the things you talked about were very different from the things we had mentioned about the farm property. So I hunted urban property a lot last year, and I had just as much fun doing it.
Yeah, it is. It's different. And I would say too, so for me on this property, and then we'll kind of move on here, but I wanted as many stands as I could around the edges of this property so I could play as many wins as I could. And there's nowhere to hang a stand in the north, and there's nowhere to hang a stand in the south because you can't get in there. You just can't without blowing out the woods. And, you walk in there any time of day. I don't care if you walk in at 3 a.m, you're walking in at 5 o'clock at night or 12 noon. If you walk through the middle of those woods, you are going to bump out deer every single time. You have to hunt the edges. So I had an opportunity to put one on the one side and one on the other to hunt those 2 wins, and that's all I can do there. But it did make it pretty easy to find the spot to hang the set. So
it's also one of those spots too, especially during the rut, where it's like the only way you can hunt it is to sit all day.
Yeah,
like you can't
leave.
Exit.
You can't leave
and grab lunch. Not that you would do that during the rut anyway, but like, every day we were in there, we sat from dusk or from dawn to dusk, just because that you can't get out.
No, you can't. I mean, you could literally like mid-noon, you're like, all right, I'm safe to get out. And it could be September 15th, and you'd have just as good of a chance as a huge buck coming walking through as if it was November 5th. I mean, that's just the nature of it. Which makes it exciting, though. It makes it's cool. It's fun. So, all right. Well, why don't we move on to probably a type of property that most people are scared of, especially in Pennsylvania, because it's a daunting task to hunt public land in Pennsylvania. But if you put in the time and you look at your maps and you look for certain things and you get way back in there, you can have a lot of success. I mean, just look behind Corey's shoulder. You can see the success that you can have on public land if you put in the time. So.
Yeah, that's my buck actually from last year. Not on this specific spot, but it's funny, I hear you guys talk, and we were joking around about giving addresses out and information about properties. And the more and more I thought about it, the more I thought about it's public land anyway, right? Now I do hunt this property I'm about to show you. I didn't really hunt it a lot last year. What's interesting is I think a lot of people think too, like public lands are very like that. There's like small patches of public land here and there. And I guess it can be like that at certain places, but the public land that I have hunted a lot over the last probably 10 years that is 6,000 acres. So there's a lot of property. Like there's a lot of deer, and there's also a lot of hunters. So what I'm going to try and explain is like the approach to hunt a public property, and then talk obviously about trail cameras and things like that, because it is a completely different, I think when we look at a property too, I think the mindset tends to be different on these different properties. You have to go into it kind of with a different approach. And to be honest, I like to use the mindset that no matter what property you're looking at, you want to think like the deer's thinking. So you want to think, what's the deer going to do in this spot if there's pressure? Like, where are they going to go? That kind of thing. And so let me just pull up this map clip, and I'll just show you kind of what.
And while you're pulling that up, it's funny that you say that, because like it is totally different. An urban private spot, right? You're going to probably walk 50 yards and hunt an edge. And you can have a ton of success. And you do that on public land, and good luck trying to kill deer on public land, hunting 20 yards from your car. It's just not going to happen. That's what everybody tends to do there. So
that's true. I mean, I'll just continue with that kind of approach, and just what I've learned over the last, like I said, I've been hunting public land a long time. I've been hunting this area probably 10 years. And it took me probably 10 years to kill a deer like is behind me on the wall. Because I think not only is there 6,000 acres, so there's a new place to explore every single year. But if you're exploring a different place every year, it's hard to really learn the patterns of the deer, learn where the deer are going, and that kind of thing. So I've been jumping around kind of, for 10 years. And last year we just happened to get on a really awesome spot. What you're kind of looking at here is can you see it move, right? You can see that.
Yeah, I can see that.
Move.
I don't know if we can see the cursor or not.
Okay. I'll try and move the map around just to kind of put everything that I'm talking about in the center of the map or the screen. Mm-hmm. So this is a public land spot. The one thing I will say is, and I'll talk about trail cameras, but another approach, a way different approach, I think, not necessarily just with public land, but urban areas too, I think, tend to have a sanctuary that's near a house. I think that's something that we see a lot. A lot of the areas, there's two things I look at on public property. I want to go where there's not going to be other hunters. Now, I'm not saying that there's never going to be another hunter there, but I want to go into a spot where a guy wouldn't think to go. Like, I want to hang a spot where a guy wouldn't want to hang a tree. Like, it's too much work to hang a stand there, so I'm not hanging a stand there, but that's where I want to hang my stand. And I want to go to a spot where the deer are going to be when the pressure comes. So I want to be in those types of areas. And we learned that last year when we were hunting the area that we were in when I killed my buck. It was an area where you probably wouldn't normally get risky on October 26th. Like, that's a spot. Like, if it was the farm, we probably would go there like November 12th if we hadn't shot a deer yet. Sure. October 26th, we're sitting in the bedroom, and we knew we were right outside the bedroom, and we had to get risky because all the deer are in there by, we open up in this area of Pennsylvania September 16th this year, so middle of September.
September 17th, they're all hiding somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to take that into account. So there's no doubt you have to know where those deer are going to go. And where they normally go on public land is they go to the outskirts of the public land, which is usually private property, and it's usually backyards. And you'd be surprised at deer that you'll see bedded behind a house on public land in late October, early November, getting towards the end of the season. So like Dave said, unfortunately and fortunately for us, there's a lot of lazy hunters out there, and they just want to get out of their car and climb in a stand and sit where they see a deer trail. Like, they'll see a deer trail and then they climb up and sit there. That's good for them, because you know what? They're going to push the deer back to where I'm sitting.
It's good for us too,
So when we talk about trail cameras though on a property like this, let me just kind of explain. So this is obviously a main road running through the center here. These fields, I just want to be real clear about something too. Like, these fields are not ag fields. They are basically just overgrown grass, weeds. They're not cut, they're not trimmed. So there is actually a lot of deer that probably bed in these fields right in the middle. A good spot where I have hunted a lot, and I actually saw one of the biggest deer probably ever, is, I'll try and put it in the center. So I was with a couple buddies of mine, and you probably can't see the cursor, but you can probably see the house right in the center.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right below the house, kind of in between the house and the main road, coming from like the southwest, almost literally right along the road. I was sitting like probably 2/3 to the left. Like, I was sitting west of that house, and maybe like southwest of that house, southwest of the house. A deer came walking up through the woods, and literally went up and bedded. I have no doubt bedded right behind the house. And it would have been like late October, that kind of thing. What I also realized is that there was, and the reason I'm telling you the story is because these are all factors that play into this that may not play into like a private property, is that small game had opened up that morning. And I totally forgot small game opened up. And so all the deer were being pushed up towards the houses because there was a bunch of guys running around with dogs, and they were squirrel hunting and rabbit hunting or whatever they were doing. And I ran into them later, so I knew, and I put two and two together. I'm like, that's why I saw a bunch of deer. I saw that deer, which was huge, big deer, and then I saw like two other bucks that morning, and they were all up in this area behind the houses. So I did some scouting actually that year after, and I found a lot of rubs and things like that up in the top here where the houses are. So bottom line is, like if you're looking at hunting public land also, I mean, entrance and exit is awesome, but like if you can get access to a private property that borders public, that's prime, because that's where the deer are going to be. And if you can access it from a private spot, you can be right into where they're at. So as far as trail cameras, and this is just, again, I'm not saying that this is, and by the way, just so you know too, this is a creek that runs through. So it's kind of a natural border. Yes, they cross the creek, but they also run along the creek. There's kind of a pinch point too. If you're looking, I actually shot a deer. Right in this tree line at dusk one night. I was sitting towards the bottom, right at the bottom of the tree line where the creek runs through. Right at the bottom of the tree line, I was sitting right at dusk, and I had a deer come down through, and I shot a doe. Back to trail cameras. So trail cameras are tough on public land. In my opinion, there's too many guys walking through to put them out in the open. So I actually heard something that I kind of liked, but this was guys that were hunting out in Missouri, where I'm sure there's maybe, I wouldn't say less guys, but where they were putting trail cameras, there's probably less guys walking through. They actually put trail cameras in areas where we're not in bedding areas at all, like Dave was talking about before, not to intrude on that. They're just trying to get an inventory. They actually know where those deer are going when they're going to hunt. Now, my approach has really been, and this year we have a trail camera set up pretty close to a bedding area. But that's also because I want to know what's going to be like. Those deer are they're on a pattern right now that I think early season they're pretty easy to kill if you can get in there, that first like couple days after the opener. So our plan is obviously to go in and hunt that area, couple days after it opens, not Saturday. That's one thing I've learned is I don't hunt public land on Saturdays. I hunt it like Wednesday, Thursday, when the wind's right, that kind of thing. Like I really watch those things. Entrance and exit. So the one thing I think anywhere you can really use this mindset, but I think specifically on public land, I think you have to have a reverse mindset. Like we can't pattern deer. What happens is the deer actually pattern the hunters. So the deer actually know where those hunters are going to be. Cause again, a lot of the hunters will walk on the same trails. They're going to the same spots. Deer know that. And so you want to be in a spot where the deer aren't expecting you to be. And that a lot of times is going to be close to, safety zones, things like that. A safety zone is a safety zone for a deer too. Remember?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
I mean, how much sign have we seen close to safety zones in public land?
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't that far from a safety zone where I shot my deer last year.
No.
We were pretty close.
I mean, look, if there's a spot that the guys aren't walking through, there's not setting in there, and it's thick, it's a good thing to know. You can bet some of the bigger deer in the area are hanging out in there.
So I think my approach, my approach with the trail camera on public land, and again, I'm not saying this is how it should be done or whatever, but my approach is I want to actually pinpoint where the deer are. Like I am trying to pattern those deer early because I want to have the first crack at those deer. And I probably won't use many trail cameras actually at all after we start hunting in September, for the reason that whether you put a lock on it or not, I'm telling you, guys will cut them off with bolt cutters. I mean, that's just it's a reality. That's what we deal with on public land. There's just a lot of guys there, and there's a lot of unfortunately, there's a lot of guys that don't do the right things or unethical. And it's not everybody, but there is enough guys out there that I'm hesitant to put a trail camera exposed somewhere where there's a bunch of guys walking through. So I don't use a lot of trail cameras. We just hunt bedding areas.
Trail cameras for like that we would use during the rut on public land would really just be for us to like see big deer around. And is it fun to do that and get excited? Yeah, but do we need to do that? No, we don't need to see. We know where the deer are. We know where they're hanging out when it gets pressured. We know that there's big deer in there. I mean, that's enough information for us. We don't need to be looking at pictures, even though we love to. It's not worth the risk on public land.
I mean, I think just about what we saw last year, I think it's actually pretty easy because, again, the hunters are generally going to go in the same areas, same trails every single year on public land. And so the deer are going to do the same thing usually every year. So the bucks are going to be in the same area cruising probably during the rut. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they're going to be just like anywhere else. They're going to be where the does are, and that's in the thick briars, thick bedding areas, things like that. Although on public land, you're going to find doe beds right up against main roads. I was on a hike actually yesterday, and I kicked up deer in a spot that you would be like, what the heck? Like, you wouldn't even think there'd be deer in there. And there was like 8 deer bedded in there. Yeah. So it's, they find funky spots to bed on public land. So
I would say one thing just to kind of add to this, I'm sure you would agree, when you're scouting public land, first of all, you got to get boots on the ground. Like, you got to get in there. You got to see what's happening. When you're doing that, as much as you're looking for deer sign, you should be looking just as much for other hunter sign.
Yep.
Look for their stands. Look for trails where guys are walking in. Look for easy trails that lead back into the woods. You can bet that guys are using that to get in, hunt right off of there.
Yep.
Look for spots that, are, is 500 yards through the thick, nasty stuff that no one can get into and no one wants to get into. That's probably a good spot to try to hunt.
Yep. Yeah, this area here is a little bit tough. But if you were say you were in the I don't know, the mountains of Pennsylvania or New York or somewhere like that, where there's long mountains, my approach would be to put a pack on and a tree stand and hike in as far as you can go till you're going to see good deer sign and things like that, because that's where guys aren't, right? They're going to hike in. They're not going to go far. So
cool.
Stand placement. It's interesting on public land. There's certainly, there's rules, like you can hang stands now on public land in Pennsylvania, but you can't leave them up all year round. I think it's like 2 weeks before the season you can hang them.
Yeah.
We like to be mobile on public land. So, we just actually, Dave and I just got, muddy tree stand. We got the muddy, hang on stands and the pro sticks. So actually that's something new for us this year, but we like to be mobile on public land. We kind of know where we're going to be. And this year we'll probably hang a set actually, because it's in an area where, I actually don't think, we kind of have a spot picked out, and I actually don't think there's going to be anybody back there. And it's kind of it's tucked into it'll be tucked into like a pine tree. So you won't be able to even see the stands, I don't think, to be honest with you. So we'll probably hang a set back there. We usually don't, but then we'll also be very mobile, and we're very disciplined on when we hunt that spot also. Yeah. We've also talked about, I have a camera in there now, and we've got some doe on there and things like that. So I know the doe are going in there and out of there, but we may not even hunt that stand now until late October. We might not even hunt it early season because I don't have any big bucks on there to hunt it. So why go in and spread your scent around where they're not, again, the deer are not used to smelling scent, human scent.
Way back in there. Yeah. I mean, our first hunt in a spot like that, I mean, that's our best chance, 100%. And after that, our odds are dropping off big time. Yep. So, if we're not seeing big deer on camera, we're going to wait it out until we know that those deer are starting to get a little frisky. When did you kill your deer last year? What was the date?
It was October 26th.
So, yeah, sometime around then when, maybe the pre-rut starting and they're starting to maybe pop out of the beds a little bit and just take a look around, that'd be a good time for us to pop in a spot like that. Close to the beds.
I think the main difference, honestly, the mindset difference on public land, for at least for us anyway, is the difference would be than if you don't have private land. Is you were talking about hunting the edges. We actually don't hunt the edges. We go right after it. We get aggressive pretty quick because you only have 2-3 shots probably to shoot a deer on public land anyway. And so we get aggressive. We go after the deer, and but we also, because we're getting aggressive, we're very disciplined on when we go in. That was the biggest success. The biggest success I think that we had last year. It was funny. We got in the stand, and I remember us talking, and I remember us saying how perfect the entry was and how quiet we were,
and how perfect the wind was too.
We got perfect.
We got in the stand, and we're like, "This is the perfect wind. Like, if it's gonna happen, like, you know, it may not happen today, but like, we set up everything in our favor today."
Yep. And it wasn't long. I mean, I think we were in by noon, and we had the deer on the ground by 2:15. So again, it was a 10-2. We were planning a 10-2 hunt. Got in there a little bit later. 2:15, I shot the deer. But that was the success. The success was the entry. So we knew, you know, how many times did I tell you, I know exactly how to get in here, but we got to be patient and we got to go in. This is the only way we can get in there without spooking deer. And it's got to be this wind. And we waited, and I remember texting you a couple days before, and I was like, we're going in this day. And it just worked out. But that's the thing. Like, you got to be aggressive, but you can only be aggressive to the point where you can't be stupid. You got to be smartly aggressive or whatever.
You can't make a mistake on public land. Like, if you do one little thing wrong, those deer are just so alert in there that, you know, one thing wrong and your chances are just, they're gone probably. Yeah.
The other thing the one last thing I'll say too about checking trail cameras when it's in the bedroom, it's tough. You know, you can't put mineral sites there either. You can't bait or anything like that. So you really have to you have to be really kind of choosy where you're going to put trail cameras on back in bedding areas and things like that. But like, you know, I have only checked that camera one time. And I may check it again like next week. But like, again, like even going in to check that camera, I wait for the right wind. I'm scent free when I go in there at this time of the year. Like Dave said, like what I think what a lot of guys don't realize is that when you're walking back through there, if you're not scent free and you reach over and you grab your trail camera and your hands not scent free and you haven't sprayed down or anything like that, you mess around with the camera, you know, that kind of thing. They pick up on that. It only takes one mistake like that for a big deer and you just won't see them.
No, you won't see them. Yeah. They don't the big deer on public land don't mess around. They see or smell or hear one thing wrong, they're not going there the rest of the season. And if they go there, it's at 2 a.m.
Yep.
That's all there is to it.
So yeah, I mean, I could talk about public land all night, but we'll be talking a lot about it as we continue these educational Zooms, right?
Yeah. You want to close your map down and we can wrap it up here. There we are. Any comments, Christian? You're being quiet over there.
I'm soaking in the lesson, fellas.
What do you need a lesson for? Dude's got the Grand Slam farm to hunt. You don't need a lesson.
There's lessons that you can pull from regardless of the hunting situation, you know. And I liked a lot of the stuff that you guys had said. Probably one of my favorites is the idea of being smartly aggressive. Is that what you called it?
Yeah. Something like that.
There is such a big difference between being aggressive and putting some thought into being aggressive. You know, it's one thing to grab your climber and just blow through the woods and get as deep as you can. And then there's another to think, okay, you know, this is where the bedding areas are. This is what I expect the deer to be doing. This is what the wind's doing, you know. So that was a neat thing that could be applied to anywhere.
It's true.
That actually reminds me, I was listening to a podcast from the other day, and they were talking about, I think it was Mark Drury, and he was talking about Terry Drury, and he said the reason that Terry's killed so many big deer, in his opinion, is because he has the guts to be so aggressive in certain situations that he's killed deer by just doing that. And there's guys that can do that, but they're intelligent about the way they do it, and I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, there's a guy that one of my uncle's friends that I've talked to a couple of times, just ridiculous deer hunter. He hunts up in northern PA, but I mean, he kills just mature deer year after year. Like, it's just no problem for him. 140, 150, 160 class deer in PA every single year. It's that good. And I remember one thing he said was, you can use like pitching as a metaphor. You just need to throw fastballs. Place them correctly, which is doing the basics. Like, you don't need to overthink things. Play the wind, hunt the edges, just do things right. But what he did say was, every once in a while, when you need to strike out, you need to throw a curveball.
Yep.
Which is interesting. It's like, you have like these basic things that you're doing. Then sometimes you just need to go in and you just need to do something crazy and get really aggressive. And sometimes that's what it takes. But even when you are aggressive, like, you're not just slinging the ball all over the place. You're still trying to throw a strike, and it's controlled, which I thought was a good analogy.
And like an exact example of that would be, like, getting aggressive doesn't mean that you forget to spray down or hurt into the stand.
None of that stuff.
You're not rushing in there or anything like that. Like, that's not the aggressive. The aggressive is the decision, right, to get closer to the bedroom.
We have a stand at the farm. We have a stand down by the creek.
Yeah.
Way around back. I hung a stand a couple months ago, and it is just a Hail Mary stand that's like, we'll hunt one time all day, and that'll be it.
Take a canoe back there, and that's it.
We're going to have to walk down the creek, full waders, hunting right off the creek. It's going to be an intense hunt. But
November 6th, that's
something like that is just a curveball. It's your curveball. And you gotta have those.
Now, you'll have Hercules on the ground before then, so.
I hope so.
If he didn't get hit by a car.
Oh, man, I hope not. I don't think he did, but
I don't think he did.
We'll see. We'll find out in September.
I hope not.
Yeah.
All right, guys. It was awesome. Let's do this again soon. Yeah. And hopefully, if anybody's listening to this, hopefully somebody was, right, that they got a little bit of information that they can, even if they've got one thing. I've learned, if you can get one thing out of all that we've talked about and apply it to your season and have success, or see more deer, or feel like you're, because the thing is it's a progression. Every year as a hunter, you want to get better and better. And even if you can take one thing from this and you can make your season better by one little step, do it every single year, and you'll have success. So.
Yep, 100%. Cool. Well, thanks for watching, guys. We're going to continue to do these leading up to the season and kind of make it into a series. And then we're also going to continue the podcast. We are working on some pretty cool guests, so we're going to continue rolling with that. And then before we know it, season will be here, and we'll hopefully be putting out some cool film for you guys to check out. So,
all right, guys. Take care, fellas.
An exciting time. A month to go.
It's almost a month exactly from our opener. Sorry, Christian, you got to wait a couple weeks.
Hey, no, I got Allegheny County. I'm September 6th.
There you go.
Oh, that's right.
Nice.
Cool. Sounds good.
I'm ready to rock and roll. Rooted Outdoors. Thanks for listening.
You got it. See you.